Hello and welcome to Wrestling at Random. I'm Jeremy Deemer.
And I am Adam Summers.
This is the podcast where every week we review a classic pro wrestling event from a streaming service.
That classic pro wrestling event could be a pay-per-view, it could be a TV special, a major territory arena show, or in the case of this week's show, Jeremy, the biggest wrestling show of the calendar year, 2003.
Absolutely, and we are going to get into a full recap of this show. And I want to remind everyone that you can listen to the entire back catalog of this podcast at wrestlingatrandom.com. And there you have all the links to interact with the show. The best way to do that is on Twitter, at WrestleAtRandom. Same thing for Instagram. And Facebook.com/WrestlingAtRandom. And all of those links to subscribe to the podcast are available at the website. And I'm sure plenty of you will have a lot of thoughts about the biggest show of the year 2003, like you just mentioned.
This back catalog, by the way, Jeremy, I just have to throw in there. We are rapidly going from having enough shows for you to be able to listen to the entire catalog one way on a road trip. We are now going to be able to provide you with audio for the going to and coming back home on a road trip.
And let me take you back to this point in 2003. WCW is out of business. ECW is out of business. And WWE is the only major company in the United States. This means WWE had one of the deepest talent rosters of all time. And they'd need this depth as injuries were the story of 2003. Out with injuries at the time of WrestleMania this year were Edge, Batista, Nash, Randy Orton. Injuries to Stone Cold Steve Austin and Kurt Angle had their careers in question. We'll talk more specifically about Angle and Austin later in the show. We open with a video with the stars of today talking about how special WrestleMania is.
This was great, by the way.
It was.
Usually the WWE, WWF opening pay-per-view videos are good, but they're a little overwrought. This was maybe just because the magnitude of the event. This felt like it was just reverent enough for what was going to be taking place.
No, and it was a great video. You felt like every guy was incredibly sincere that Mania was the most important night for them.
Because they weren't yelling and screaming. They were, for the most part, they were pretty subdued in talking about why it was so important. And that actually gave it much more weight than if it was just yelling and screaming.
Speaking of yelling and screaming, we hear Limp Bizkit, who will be performing later at this show. Their music is the theme song for the show. And we see a packed Safeco Field, March 30th, 2003, from Seattle, Washington. This is the baseball stadium where the Seattle Mariners play. 54,097 fans, which is a legitimate number. It's the all-time record for Safeco Field in Seattle. The live gate for this show was $2,760,035, and the show surprisingly did poorly on pay-per-view with only 550,000 buys. The company was thinking it would do closer to 800,000, and with this card, I would have thought the same thing.
Yeah, this is, you talked about a deep roster. This is as star-studded of a lineup as you could really have, and we'll get into that as we go through. It's also notable in that we have two announced teams, much like Starrcade 86. I would say this is probably the only comparison we can make to Starrcade 86, other than Ric Flair is here later on in this show as well. But we have Michael Cole and Taz representing SmackDown, and Jim Ross and Jerry Lawler representing Monday Night Raw.
That's right. JR and the King are introduced, and you know it's a big show because JR has his John Wayne cufflinks on.
Yes.
So I do want to make a mention that, of those 54,000 fans, I was one of those in attendance at this show. I had a streak of attending WrestleMania 18 through 23, and I also had disposable income and was single, so I sat within the first 5 rows for every one of those shows. I was in row 4 here tonight. And
yes, you were sending me text messages over the last couple of days as we were each watching this show with screenshots and arrows pointing to you with concerned looks on your face at certain points of this WrestleMania.
And I had plenty of reason to be concerned. We'll get to those later.
Yes,
I did want to share quick memories from being there in attendance. Where the ring was positioned on the field, my seats would have been between second base and where the center fielder would stand. So that should tell you where the ring was positioned. I was 4 rows from the corner of the ring, so the ring was half on the infield, half on the outfield towards center field. And the building itself has a roof, but the sides are open air. And so it was really neat because you felt like you were outside. You could feel the breeze, but you were protected from any rain. There was no rain. It was a beautiful night for wrestling.
No rain in Seattle?
No, it was a beautiful night for wrestling, and it was a great weekend all around. They didn't have the Hall of Fame yet as an event to attend. This wasn't. There wasn't a bunch of indie wrestling shows around the area or anything. This was, it was WWE only, and it was the fan access for 2 days. And I think we had a breakfast with like a couple of the wrestlers coming out and doing a Q&A. And
you have a Legends lunch with Boris Zukov?
I didn't, but we did have the access was really fun, and it's a lot bigger now and less fun. But this was like a small time. It was like the second year they had done one of those, or third year. So it was a really good experience. It was a really good weekend all around. But let's get right into the matches themselves. We talk about this being a deep roster and a show of holy cow, potential Hall of Famers all over the show. The opener is the Cruiserweight Championship. Challenger Rey Mysterio Jr. taking on the champion Matt Hardy version 1 with Shannon Moore. This was Mysterio's first WrestleMania.
Yeah, and we had some. Not only was it Mysterio's first WrestleMania, we had some Matt facts, if we remember that part of the version 1 gimmick.
I loved Matt Hardy's videos with it looked like an old Real Player or one of those old players in the browser, and it would
it said, as he was coming out to the ring, it said Matt often wonders how they ever did WrestleMania without him. So it was those sorts of things. We had Shannon Moore with him. They kept calling him Matt's little MFer. So that was a thing. And Shannon Moore and Matt Hardy go way back to the old Omega days, not Kenny Omega, but the old Omega wrestling days in North Carolina. So there's some history there. And the thing I guess that I'll note before we get into this match, it's kind of a trend for the first, 2, 3, 4 matches of this show. They are working at like a fast forward pace. It's clear that there's a lot on this show and not a lot of time for some of these matches to get what they need to get done.
That's right. A lot of these early matches are all action, rushed, but still good stuff here. The gimmick for Matt Hardy's character is that he barely makes weight to be a cruiserweight.
Yes.
So
they said he cut weight the whole time to be able to get to this, and he's a large cruiserweight.
Yeah, he's always cutting weights, and I remember some of those vignettes of him in the trash bag suits and stuff, trying to lose weight in the sauna and everything. And it's an immediate start, like we said. Matt backdropped over the top rope. Ray does a corkscrew plancha over the top onto Matt and Shannon on the floor. This is how WrestleMania opens. Mysterio tries a sunset flip bomb to the floor, but Shannon Moore is able to break it up. Matt Hardy gets control, goes for a twist of fate, and there's a great reversal into a roll-up by Mysterio for a near fall.
Yes, and that was, it's a lot of what this match was sort of Mysterio, which, he's an underdog. That's what he does, but kind of fighting out from underneath and hitting cool counters, cool pinning combinations. Michael Cole on this show.
We're going to be talking a lot about the announcing on this show.
I have something to say about Michael Cole right here. Ray, basically right after what you said happens, Ray hits his flying, for lack of a better term, it's like a flying crotch drop off the top.
Yeah.
Sort of a bombs away, hits a second rope springboard crossbody, like rebound out of the corner. Very cool. He then hits a tilt-a-whirl head scissors. And Michael Cole says, and I quote, "A little whirly twirly."
A little whirly twirly with the leg scissors. That's what.
Yes.
Yes. I wrote it down exactly too because it was completely nuts.
He constantly calls head scissors leg scissors throughout this, and yes, a little whirly twirly. Fortunately, Rey Mysterio makes us all forget about that by hitting an awesome tornado DDT. He then goes for his single leg into the bottom rope, so then he can go for the 619. But Shannon Moore stops him, and then we get. It's sort of Vince McMahon, I'm sure, in Michael Cole's ear, trying to channel himself as a play-by-play guy. Matt Hardy hits the twist of fate. Cole starts screaming about how the match is over, but Mysterio kicks out.
And I do want to say, yeah, both guys had really crisp offense. Ray's high flying was solid. He wasn't sloppy or anything on all. This was great. Everything that they did was so crisp and really really quick. It was absolutely great. So Mysterio kicks out of the twist of fate. Matt Hardy, he's standing on the bottom rope, and he's got Mysterio up in like a razor's edge type position, and Taz immediately says he's going for a Splash Mountain Bomb, which is absolutely the right thing to say. It's the opposite of Michael Cole.
My thought watching this, and we'll get into it with the announcers, is this show as a TV broadcast would have been exponentially better if it was Jim Ross and Taz calling this show together the whole time. Like, I enjoyed a lot of what was on here, but you had one very good guy on each broadcast team and one insufferably terrible guy for different reasons on each broadcast team.
Yeah, and Matt Hardy did not hit the Splash Mountain Bomb, but Mysterio reversed it into a Rana instead. 619, he misses the West Coast pop. Mysterio tries to leap onto Matt's shoulders, but he throws him over his head. Ray bounces off the middle rope back onto Matt's shoulders, tries to roll him up. Matt sits down on it, grabs the rope for leverage, gets the 3 count. Still champion Matt Hardy.
This was an awesome finish. I had completely forgotten about this match, so I just expected that Rey Mysterio in his first WrestleMania was going to win the Cruiserweight title here, so I was a little bit surprised. But yeah, that sequence where he goes for a springboard victory roll, it happens a couple times in different ways, and then he rolls through and Hardy stuffs it, grabs the ropes, gets the 3 count via cheating, and yes, Matt Hardy retains. And then immediately this is a little bit past the Crash TV era of WWE, but it certainly still feels like it here. We immediately go to the back, and there are 2 women that get out of a limo and start arguing about whether Hogan versus Vince or Austin versus The Rock is bigger. I have no idea what's happening here or why this is happening.
Well, let me catch you up. First, 5 minutes, 39 seconds on that. Super fun opening match. And the fun ended there. As you mentioned, we are in the back with, these are the Miller Lite Catfight girls. They arrived in the limo. Now, in 2002, there was a Miller Lite ad campaign where 2 women would get into a fight arguing less filling or tastes great. And after eventually stripping down to their underwear in a pool, it's revealed it's guys trying to imagine the perfect beer commercial. These controversial ads resulted in sales of Miller Lite declining by 3%. So,
tremendous. As it should be.
As it should.
If the ads were anything like the segments here, I would have liked 3% of my pay-per-view purchase price back.
And this would not be the last time we see the Miller Lite Catfight girls.
It, in fact, would not.
Earlier tonight, we're shown Nunzio from the Full-Blooded Italians, the FBI. We see him luring Nathan Jones into the locker room.
By the way, Nunzio is the former Little Guido that we've talked about on several of the ECW-themed editions of this podcast.
That's right, the same one who cut off the thumb of the Sinister Minister. Yeah.
Just a few years later, here he was as the most bit of all bit players in the lead up to WrestleMania.
So Big Show and the A-Train take out Nathan Jones. So tonight it will be a handicap match. The Big Show and A-Train versus The Undertaker, because Nathan Jones is not able to compete. I ordered this show. I was regularly watching the WWE at this time, mostly just out of the inertia, I guess, of this, like, as you mentioned, the situation of ECW and WCW being dead.
I blocked out a lot of this era. I have no recollection at all of Big Show and A-Train being a team. I have even less recollection and still find it hard to believe now after I watched this that Nathan Jones and The Undertaker were aligned.
Yeah, it was like that was going to be a mentor-mentee thing for him, but they kept pulling the plug on Nathan Jones's debuts because he was terrible, and they needed him to go to OVW to go to their developmental territory in OVW to actually become a better wrestler. But they just were so enamored with his physical appearance that they kept pushing him when he clearly wasn't ready.
No, he was far from ready. I remember seeing him on, is it WWA or WWWA? These very shortly after the death of WCW, there were a couple of pay-per-views from Australia that had a bunch of former WCW guys. In a lot of ways, it kind of bridged the gap between WCW and the creation of the NWA TNA promotion with the weekly Wednesday night pay-per-views. And Nathan Jones was their big star, and he was terrible. And then WWE apparently saw that he was a large man, and so they signed him. And yeah, this was going to be coming up, but first we had Limp Bizkit.
No, we had the announcement. Please welcome the WWE's favorite band in the whole world, Limp Bizkit.
That's right. How dare I? I don't believe that announcement was made by Howard Finkel, who did do ring announcing. Again, for the
Raw matches, it was Howard Finkel, and for the SmackDown matches,
not shown on TV. They didn't tell us that it was Howard Finkel. They didn't show him because, God forbid, we saw someone who wasn't young on the TV screen because of Vince's complex about that. We see Howard Finkel one time, like by accident, as there's a ringside brawl, but no, he did not have the honor.
He's so good. Still so
good. In 2003, he still has it, but he did not have the honor of introducing the WWE's favorite band, as you said, in the whole world.
In the whole world.
Bizkit.
So they play Keep Rolling, and this was lame when I was there in the building. I was totally fast forwarding here too. Let me quote a Limp Bizkit lyric: "If you don't care, we don't care." And I really didn't care then or now. And we skipped it. But then out comes The Undertaker on his motorcycle because Limp Bizkit, this was his theme song at the time. So we still have Biker Taker. Last time we saw Biker Taker, he was winning the hardcore title at Vengeance 2001 that we reviewed here on the podcast. So
I believe that was 2002.
2002. No, yeah, it was Vengeance 2001, which was December of 2001, so it was going right.
Oh, okay, yeah, right before the turn of the calendar.
And so, yeah, he's still a biker, but I don't think he's Booger Red anymore. I think he's just Big Evil in 2003.
Yeah, I think hopefully in the intervening year plus, someone talked Jim Ross out of calling him Booger Red.
So while Taker's still a biker, Albert's the A-Train. He's no longer the hip-hop hippo here.
No, he is still very hairy, though.
So Taker's mania streak is at risk. It's crazy how amazing that streak was. He's 10-0 at this point, and they made sure to mention it and really put it over like it was a big deal.
Well, this is right around when they started talking about it. For the first however many years, it wasn't a thing. And even here, they talk about it. But you look at years later, his match at WrestleMania with the streak on the line was always like one of the top featured matches. This is The Undertaker going on second at WrestleMania.
Yes, but he did have Limp Bizkit playing his theme song live. So
well, there you go.
We did have.
I don't know if that's a plus or a minus.
It was a minus for the fans. Undertaker, yeah. You're going to hear me. I apologize to the fans of nu metal out there. Feel free to hit us up on Twitter at WrestleAtRandom. Let us know why you like nu metal, because I don't get it. I never did. I did in 2003, and I don't now. So it's all Taker early, beating up both guys.
I thought this was Taker versus two Vaders here, if you recall from the Canadian Stampede show where Vader got. I was waiting for Paul Bearer to appear so A-Train and Big Show could get some offense.
Undertaker counters a Big Show chokeslam into an armbar, and then he puts an armbar on the A-Train. which allows Big Show to drop a huge leg across Taker's face to break up the armbar, showing once again you should not do jiu-jitsu when you're outnumbered. You leave yourself wide open.
I feel like that's like the first rule of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu is, do not lock on an armbar when there are multiple men hovering over you. It probably won't work out well. The one thing I noted from this match right away is the Undertaker is flying around the ring here. He is moving.
Yeah, he's very, very quick, very agile, really trying to, they only have, less than 10 minutes here, and he's all over the place and looking good.
He was every bit as quick as the opener with the cruiserweight guys. He was flying. My other note from a move name standpoint, if it really matters, which I guess it doesn't, but I'm always just amused by why things like this change. The Baldo Bomb is apparently now called the Derailer.
The Derailer, yes. Lots of double teaming, including multiple long abdominal stretches.
Yes, when we talk about wanting the abdominal stretch to come back,
not this.
This tested my desire for that move's return. We had each of them lock on long and not particularly well applied abdominal stretches. Then we have one of these ab stretches. Taker reverses and hits a back suplex, and Michael Cole calls it a gut wrench suplex.
Ugh. After a successful choke slam by the Big Show, Nathan Jones makes his way out, takes out both Big Show and the A-Train with kicks to the face.
Yeah, he hits a huge spin kick to, I believe it was Show on the floor, which we don't get a great shot of, but we get a replay of it later. And a big boot on the A-Train in the ring.
And Undertaker struggles to get A-Train up for the tombstone. He doesn't lose him, but it was terrifying. And then he hits it for the win.
Honestly, I don't know that I've ever seen Undertaker have to work harder to get a man up for a tombstone than he did here with A-Train. And then A-Train is like, I am not going to allow myself to fall. He basically figure fours his legs around Undertaker's head to make sure that he stays in place. Taker hits this huge tombstone, gets the win. And I have in my notes, which was confirmed by you, that Nathan Jones was so terrible that they had to protect him by barely working. Michael Cole then says, Nathan Jones and The Undertaker are a force to be reckoned with. My favorite part of this match by far is that in the post-match, Undertaker, who is supposed to be the mentor of Nathan Jones, there's not a single moment that he acknowledges that Nathan Jones is alive, much less mere feet from him. He does not acknowledge Nathan Jones' presence at all.
9 minutes, 45 seconds in that match. To the back again with the Miller Lite Catfight girls meeting Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler. Nothing happens except Lawler gets excited.
I start to think here that we may be keeping up the streak of Stacy Keibler being involved in all-time terrible wrestling segments, and that will be confirmed later on.
That's right, as she was a part of the wedding gown match, Bash at the Beach 2000 episode, if you want to hear us review one of the all-time worst pay-per-views from start to finish.
Yes.
we see clips from Sunday Night Heat, which was the pre-show for this.
I do not understand what happened here at all. What I have in my notes is that like the Dudleys hit a 3D on Lance Storm,
mm-hmm.
but then they help Lance Storm keep the tag titles by pinning Rob Van Dam, and apparently Lance Storm's tag team championship partner was the former Val Venus, Shawn Morley.
Yeah, so I had to look up what happened here because apparently this match was for the Raw Tag Team Championship. It was the team you mentioned. He's Chief Morley here. So Chief Morley and Lance Storm against Kane and Rob Van Dam as the challengers. And the Dudley Boys were not in this match. The Dudley Boys were not in this match. And those were real teams. They were, this is not Battle Bowl.
I was going to say, this isn't Battle Bowl. Again, going back to our Clash of the Champions 92 episode, I feel like Missy Hyatt and Jesse Ventura should have been telling us that this was the first Battle Bowl match coming up at Starrcade. How are these real teams, much less real teams, competing for the tag team championship in the pre-show of WrestleMania?
So apparently Storm and Morley kept the tag titles over RVD and Kane.
And this explanation took at least twice as long as what they actually showed us.
Because what they showed us made no sense, and we were we had no clue
whatsoever.
What happened. Yeah. The Women's Championship triple threat match is next. Trish Stratus versus Jazz versus the women's champion Victoria with Steven Richards in her corner.
Yes, the former Stevie Richards, who is absolutely jacked here. Another act that I have very little memory of, Victoria and Stevie Richards being together. And they mentioned that Jazz had just returned from ACL surgery, an injury that had been caused by Trish Stratus.
Now, this match was great. We've had a streak of WWE, WWF women's matches that were not great. This one was fantastic. And all three women in this match were great. Victoria with a flip over the top rope into a leg drop on Trish for a near fall.
She killed her on this. This was, And they, by the way, they also keep reminding us, as if it's ever not the case in WWE triple threat matches, that the first pinfall wins the match. This is one of the initial things on this show where they just beat you over the head with the phrase over and over and over again.
No, and when it comes to a beating, Trish is great at taking a beating. Her selling was fantastic. All three of the women were way better than I remembered. Richards, he interferes, throwing Jazz off of Trish, breaking up an STF. They were trying to have a serious match, and it was going well, but it was so distracting having Lawler calling this match. Like he was calling it like it was the wedding gown match from Bash at the Beach. This is completely ridiculous.
It's completely ridiculous. It's Lawler was unforgivably bad on this show, and one of the most interesting things to chart or to pay attention to as this show goes on is how angry Jim Ross gets throughout this show.
Yes.
It is to the point to where, and there's several matches later where I think it's even more noticeable, but
no, it starts here. It starts
here. But what I was trying to say was that my theory, because we know that Vince McMahon oftentimes uses the color commentator as the proxy for himself, and we know that Vince McMahon likes messing with Jim Ross. I have a theory that Vince McMahon, who would have a match later on this show, that he made it abundantly clear to Jerry Lawler that part of your job tonight is to just piss off Jim Ross and get him off of his game. Oh, just for Vince's own amusement.
Mission accomplished, because Jim Ross was frustrated throughout this show with Lawler, and it started here in this match.
Yeah.
So Victoria missed a moonsault that was perfect. Richards hits the top rope with a chair, so it bounces off into his face like a goof.
This was classic.
Trish hits him with her Stratisfaction Bulldog. Trish is able to counter Victoria's attempt at her finisher, the Widow's Peak.
One of the most visually impressive wrestling finishers of that time, for sure.
She's able to counter it, hits a chick kick, which is her kick to the head, gets the 3 count. New women's champion Trish.
The kick was more of like a middle kick. It was not as much of a head kick as she usually hits. But this was really fun. This was and it would have been
17 seconds.
It would have been infinitely more enjoyable if we didn't have to put up with Jerry Lawler at his absolute worst. We then go to the back with the Coach and The Rock, and The Rock cuts a great, serious promo here for the most part until the very end, talking about that this is the final chapter to the greatest rivalry ever, Stone Cold versus The Rock. He says the fans called him a sellout and booed him at last year's WrestleMania. This was awesome. And I am not the biggest Rock guy in the world, by the way. I am not a huge Rock guy, particularly back then. I can look back now and enjoy it more than I did back then. But this was fantastic.
Heel Rock is awesome. The people hurt me, so I can care less about the people, he says. And he was fantastic. This was his Hollywood character, too good for WWE and the fans and everything, and he wants to come. He's done it all. He's got a bright future ahead of him. The one thing eating at him is that Austin's beaten The Rock the last 2 times at WrestleMania. Act 1 and Act 2 don't matter. Act 3 is the climax to this rivalry. Great stuff.
Absolutely. And this was kind of that in between period where Rock was still, he had done the Scorpion King movie, but he was still a pretty regular character on WWE television, but time was running out for that to be the case because Hollywood was calling in a big way.
triple threat match for the WWE Tag Team Championship. We have Los Guerreros, Eddie and Chavo Guerrero, versus Chris Benoit and Rhino, which here's a team I did not remember was ever a team.
No, that just screams of like, creative doesn't have anything for you, so we'll throw these two guys together.
Well, and I'll get to what the original plans were for Chris Benoit on this show later when we talk about the Angle and Lesnar match. And the champions here are Team Angle, Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin.
Who they tell us that they were only like 3 months into their WWE run at this point. Charlie Haas in particular, they had both been in OVW for quite a while and had been getting dark matches. My thought watching this match, and we'll get into the bulk of the match, but I was so angry when this match was over, thinking about that they didn't keep Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin together as a team for 15 years.
Right? I loved the Team Angle threesome that they had.
Yes.
And Paul Heyman was their manager briefly. And this act was fantastic. And the Team Angle, they all had matching warm-up suits. I loved the matching warm-up suits. Similar
styles. They worked. And Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin were never better in their careers than they were as a tag team together. Like it was so indicative of WWE's just lack of interest or lack of value of tag teams that these guys weren't just kept together to run the tag division for a decade. It would have been perfectly acceptable. More than that, it would have been great.
I hate the rules of this match. Okay, let's talk about the rules.
First pinfall wins in a three-way tag team match. So you basically just have everyone making saves on everybody.
And it's even worse because you can tag anyone into the match.
Yes.
But the champs could lose the titles without being beaten. So theoretically, they should never tag someone that's not their partner.
Yeah. And
the other teams can't win if they're not in the match. So they should never tag someone who's also not their partner.
Yeah.
So because
made no sense.
You never want to find yourself both you and your partner on the outside. That doesn't make any sense. So the first tag of the match, Charlie Haas tags out to Benoit. Oh, I hate the rules of this match. I was so mad.
Yeah.
But thank goodness because that Benoit and Eddie Guerrero got in there together early, because then I forgot all about all of my problems with the rules, because it was just glorious watching Eddie and Benoit in there together. Brutal chops, great action.
And it was very non-WWE Eddie and non-WWE Benoit. And it was like, you would see when these guys, and later, whether it be, to a lesser extent, a Dean Malenko, or even when you see Chris Jericho in there with sort of like one of his guys, when they got to get in there with a guy they had wrestled a lot before and had, obviously great rapport and great chemistry with, they kind of dropped the WWE house style and went hard like they did before.
And if you smash cut to 1 year later at WrestleMania 20, Eddie Guerrero would be the WWE champion and Chris Benoit would be the world's heavyweight champion. So 1 year
and it's
from
crazy.
This point,
it's crazy to think back at something that was, without a doubt, in the very, very short list of most, maybe the best ending to a WrestleMania for, hardcore fans, the biggest feel-good moment in a long time at that point. And then you look at just a few short years later, the untimely passing of Eddie Guerrero and the horrific situation with Chris Benoit.
It's
was
crazy how that all ended. Eddie's in there with Rhino, and he looks like he's going for a test of strength. And Rhino leans in to lock hands, and Eddie just drop kicks him in the face. That was awesome. It was very creative, but few guys could pull that off like Eddie did. That was so quick and so fast.
Oh yeah.
Haas and Benjamin were breaking up pin attempts, which was smart.
Including after a huge superplex from Benoit on Eddie. Eddie had gone to the top after hitting a Saito suplex on Benoit. Benoit hits a superplex. Shelton breaks it up. We get an awesome spot with Chris Benoit hitting a huge tip up into a crippler crossface. But Charlie Haas breaks that up. That's another one of those where if that wasn't Benoit and Eddie, they would have never tried that. But since it was those two guys, no problem.
Benjamin has a cover on Chris Benoit. Eddie with a frog splash onto Benjamin, who's on top of Benoit in a great spot.
There was also another great spot just before that, right after the crossface spot, where Benoit goes for a tilt-a-whirl. Guerrero just flips out of it, lands on his feet, and immediately hits a huge brainbuster. Like those two guys.
Oh, that brainbuster was brutal. That was great.
Oh, just incredible.
Rhino hits a spear, which he hits the gore. He gores Haas and Chavo. Eddie pulls Rhino out of the ring to the floor. Benjamin crawls onto Chavo for the cover and the 3 count. Still tag team champions, Team Angle. This match was short, but Eddie Guerrero is so great. 8 minutes, 46 seconds.
Yeah, wow. This was even shorter than I realized. And I've written down in my notes, completely hectic, but very good action. And that's exactly what it was. It was just move, breaking up pinfalls, really no chance for anything to breathe, but they made the absolute most of that less than 9 minutes that they had.
We go backstage, and guess who's there? It's the Miller Lite Catfight Girls with Tori Wilson and Stacy Keibler.
And then they start arguing about the same argument that the Miller Lite Girls had before about whether it's Vince or Hogan. And then whether it's Vince or Hogan who created WrestleMania
what it is. Well, who made WrestleMania what it is? Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan. Vince McMahon, Hulk Hogan. They argue like the Miller Lite Catfight Girls commercial. It's lame.
The thing I noted is that then the Miller Lite Girls started having the same argument, and one of them kept saying Hulk Hogan, as though he was like a mix of Bret Hull and Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan.
Send that Photoshop of a mix of Bret Hull and Hulk Hogan to @wrestle@random. Send us that Photoshop.
Yes, or maybe even better, Bobby Hull, because that would be a little bit more terrifying.
So, like
JR, by the way, they go back to the booth, and JR is clearly annoyed. He's like, "Wait, can we get back to wrestling now?"
Wait, I'm not done yet. We're not done with this segment yet because
I'm trying to be. This is like me. I'm basically channeling you during the graveyard match from Bash at the Beach 2000. Like, you're wanting to tell every detail, and I just wanted to move on.
Yes, no, because this was so horrible that the Catfight Girls. So they are having So Stacy and Tori were having this Hogan McMahon argument, and then they just like Stacy says whatever, and her and Tori leave, and the Catfight Girls have literally the exact same argument that they just had word for word. This was completely like so annoying. And then they say, well, they should settle it in the ring. And then one of the Catfight Girls says, or in bed, which made Lawler yell, "What?" And that was the one funny thing that Lawler did the entire show.
Yes.
And we cut back to the booth where JR is clearly annoyed with this whole situation.
Yes. And that's the other thing. Like, JR also makes it a point here to talk about, he constantly throughout the show refers to wrestling and wrestlers, and he says it with that same emphasis that I'm using right now. And so this, I don't know, but this feels like this is a time of tension between Jim Ross and the WWE, or Jim Ross and Vince McMahon, and legitimately that was the vibe I got.
We get a Shawn Michaels, Chris Jericho video package, and I am excited. I'm excited watching this because I loved this match live so much. It was my favorite match of the show. The main event would have been, except for the ending kind of took it down. We will get to that. But this was my favorite match. I've never watched the TV version, so I was really looking forward to watching the TV version because live, this match was so great. The story going into the match is that Jericho wanted to be like Shawn Michaels, and they showed videos of young Jericho doing the same moves as young Michaels, and that was fantastic.
Awesome.
Fading between the two.
Like Smoky Mountain Wrestling footage of him doing cross bodies off the top. Exactly going back and forth and showing how similar they were. But Jericho then says that they cut to an in-ring promo between them, and Jericho says he doesn't want to be like Shawn Michaels anymore. Instead, he wants to end his career at WrestleMania.
Yeah, I grew out of wanting to be the next Shawn Michaels. Instead, I want to be the first Chris Jericho. Michaels, now, he's returning from what was thought to have been a career-ending injury. Michaels, 2 months before WrestleMania, WrestleMania 2 months before WrestleMania 14, took a bump on a casket at the Royal Rumble in San Jose.
Horrific. A casket match, obviously, the Undertaker gets thrown over the top rope, almost clears the casket, but lands back first on like the far edge of the casket. And that, that's pretty much the beginning of the end for him. Like he goes on to WrestleMania. And
he had herniated discs in his lower back, and he was the WWE champion at the time. He sat out except doing angles on television, and he returned at WrestleMania 14, fought through the pain, gave a gutsy performance in pain in dropping that title to Stone Cold Steve Austin.
And took a hell of a back bump off a right hand from Mike Tyson, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. The Mania match actually worsened his condition, and instead of being out for 6 months, he ended up only wrestling one match over the next 4+ years before returning August 25th, 2002 at SummerSlam. So this is March 2003, so this is his triumphant return to WrestleMania. Michaels tries to set off a confetti gun. 2 of them don't work. One of them does.
The Shawn Michaels version of a Johnny B. Bad blaster. And yes, I laughed and laughed and laughed as he's coming out as an older Shawn Michaels to his Shawn Michaels sexy boy toy music. And he has the one doesn't go off, another one doesn't go off, but because he's Shawn Michaels and he's a pro, he somehow makes it into a positive, and he gets down to the last one, he acts like he's praying for it to work, and then it does, and it was very funny.
Full pyro entrance for Michaels. Pyro in the ring, pyro on the side of the arena. Again, his triumphant return to WrestleMania 5 years after that Austin match. So this was a big deal. And the match starts with back and forth arm drags, headlock takeovers, hip tosses. They're matching each other move for move. It's a stalemate early on. And
Jerry Lawler is at his worst here. Is they're having a great start with, trading moves, trading holds, great wrestling start. And Lawler starts making fun of them doing like arm drags and hip tosses and stuff. And like Jim Ross is like, that's what you do in a wrestling match. What else would you do in a
wrestling match, right?
It's just the absolute worst.
Jericho and Michaels are going back and forth off the ropes. Michaels with a leapfrog. Jericho puts on the brakes when Michaels goes for another leapfrog, and Jericho slaps him right in the face. The crowd audibly gasps at this move.
Yes, this was fantastic. I will note that like the opening part of the match, the first third of the match, it's very good, but you can also tell that while these are two great wrestlers, you can tell they haven't wrestled each other very often, if ever, to this point in a major match. Different styles. I mean, Michaels has been, ever since he left the AWA and came to WWF, has been steeped in that very smooth WWF style, whereas Chris Jericho, having been all around the world, he's a high flyer, but he has a bit more of a rugged style, and maybe isn't quite as silky smooth as Michaels is here. So it never goes off the rails, but you can, they would go on to have better exchanges, I would say, or more smooth exchanges in later matches than they did in the early part of this match here.
Jericho thrown to the outside. Michael slingshots over the top rope. Jericho moves because he sees it coming, but Michaels lands on the apron, slides under the bottom rope back in the ring. Jericho is pointing to his temple for how smart he is, turning his back to the ring, allowing Michaels to hit him with a baseball slide. Back in the ring, Jericho gets his offense in. Michaels, he countered the Bulldog setup for the Lion Salt by pushing Jericho off, and he ends up landing crotch first onto the second turnbuckle.
Yes, this was awesome, and this was one of the smoother spots of the early part of the match, and it also was just before that, the beginning of Jericho starting to work over Shawn Michaels' back, which at this point was, I guess for some of the Big Audio Nightmare listeners of this show, Michaels' back at this point in his career is like late stage Hiroshi Tanahashi's knee. It's going to get worked over every single match. That's going to be the story.
100%. But the early part of the match, Michaels was doing moves showing that his injured back is strong. So he was doing the skin the cat to get back in the ring.
Even hitting a plancha to the floor after that baseball slide that you talked about.
Yep. He and so Michaels tries a drop kick on the floor, and Jericho counters into the walls of Jericho on the floor. And this is the first time that the back comes into question. Jericho's watching the referee's count to make sure he doesn't get counted out, but he wants to keep the hold on as long as possible and do as much damage as possible. Jericho breaks the count. So he breaks the hold, runs inside, breaks the count, then back outside to work over the now injured back of Michaels.
Yes, he breaks the count. I mean, ostensibly, while he is a heel, and most times a heel wouldn't mind getting a count out victory, the whole reason he wants this match is to prove that, to end the career and prove that he's better than Shawn Michaels. So, I mean, I guess in theory, if he wanted to end his career, he could have just kept the walls of Jericho on outside of the ring, gotten a double count out and ended his career, but he wanted to end the career and in the process get a pin on him or submission, but in the ring.
Yeah, people would get so mad at this point of Michaels' comeback when anyone worked over Michaels' back.
Yes.
Like, people were angry that you would do it because he sold it like he was hurt, hurt
people
badly.
People knew that it was, the back injury was legit and that he had been gone for so long that, this working over Michaels' back, it got a lot more heat than most things like that, than working over a body part would for anyone else back in 2003.
No, and because Michael's back hurt so badly when he was wrestling, he knows how to sell it like it actually, how it actually hurt. And so,
well, he also, the other thing too is even visually, he doesn't look like an old man. He can still move, but the shape or the arc of his back is different. You look at him and you can tell this is a man that had a serious back problem. So all of that, what you said, combined with that, it made for a level of sympathy and then anger from the crowd that you wouldn't normally get in that era of wrestling.
Absolutely. Jericho hits a perfect springboard dropkick. This was picture perfect. The guys are on with every single move at this point, and Jericho's just yelling, "I'm better than you," as he's slapping him around. and this is where I noted that Jim Ross is doing a great job talking about the history, pointing out the moves and the impacts to the back. This is the stuff we love about Jim Ross.
Yes, he was fantastic here.
Jericho hits Michaels with a flying forearm, then does the kip up, and Jericho doing Shawn's moves here made the crowd go crazy with hatred for Chris Jericho.
They were very upset. We do have to backtrack, though, because there is a spot that I don't fully understand what happened. The announcers, I think, got it completely wrong. Right before what you said, Jericho goes for a backdrop. Michaels counters it. Jericho almost gets him all the way over, but Michaels comes back down. It looks like it's a DDT from Michaels on Jericho, but Jim Ross says that Jericho hit him with a whiplash style slam, and then they both just kind of get up, and you don't know who hit who with the move. It was just weird.
That was clunky. That was a little awkward. So after Jericho does Shawn Michaels moves, Jericho does the Shawn Michaels pose as Michaels.
That was the best part.
Michaels behind him does his own kip up, and Michaels he's in control now. And Michaels on the top rope hits Jericho with a moonsault for a near fall.
The standing moonsault where Jericho is, Michaels he never would do a moonsault where a guy was on the ground, but he would sometimes do this where the opponent was standing, and that's what he hit here. Hit it perfectly, he was. If there were any concerns legitimately about Shawn Michaels' back and just him being able to hold up for a match like this, he was doing everything he could to dispel that.
Jericho hits a perfect lion salt, long 2 count only. Michaels goes for a hurricanrana, but it's countered into the walls of Jericho, and the place is on its feet.
Yes.
After a rope break, Jericho hits a double underhook into a backbreaker. And Jericho to the top rope, hits his back elbow, then goes to tune up the band, stomping his foot in the corner. He's going to give Michaels the sweet chin music super kick. And he nails him with it.
Nails it perfectly for a guy that I don't recall having ever seen use a super kick to that point.
Yeah.
He nails it.
Yeah, absolutely nailed it. Michaels kicks out. And then he starts his comeback, but Jericho nails him with a forearm in the lower back kidney area, and that immediately cuts him off. Just one forearm to the kidneys.
The Michaels comeback started, by the way, with an awesome second rope cross body where he gets thrown into the corner, jumps to the second rope, comes back at the cross body, then hits a bunch of grounded punches. I don't know why, but I always love when Michaels would do that. And then, we get the one punch, the one forearm to the lower back. And again, it's perfect given the story of the match.
Jericho tries a belly to back suplex off the top. Michael shifts his weight, crashes down, crossbody position onto Jericho. Jericho's down. Michael's to the top rope. And Jericho kicks the referee into the ropes, more like pushing him with his foot than kicking him.
Yeah, sort of nudges him into the ropes, and Michaels falls, crotches himself on the rope.
And then Jericho tries to superplex him off. Michaels counters by dropping Jericho face first, and he crashes to the mat face first. Absolutely brutal.
This was basically a front face superplex where Michaels stays on the top rope. Jericho obviously doesn't, and he landed at a pretty nasty angle and sets up it's a perfect opportunity for Shawn Michaels to hit his big top rope elbow drop.
And then it's time for him to tune up the band, but he misses Sweet Chin Music. Jericho counters back into the walls of Jericho again, and the place is going absolutely bonkers. The place is crazy right now. I'm there screaming also. It's such a the atmosphere was just so great at this point.
Yes, and this match was to this point, and obviously the rest of it, it was just a very smart match, and they didn't necessarily rely on some of the tropes of WWE modern or of that era main event style that we'll get into a little bit later. This was just a really, really intelligently worked and very well executed match, particularly as it went along.
Jericho pulls him back to the middle, but he gets back to the ropes again. Jericho at this point is frustrated, and he charges in, eats the super kick from Michaels. Perfect timing, but Jericho kicks out of the super kick.
There's a little bit of a delay. Both men are down. Michaels hits the desperation super kick, but can't make the cover right away. Finally, crawls over, just gets a single arm onto Jericho, but it's not enough for the 3 count.
No, remember this later for the Triple H Booker T match.
Yes.
So the finish itself comes out of nowhere as Michaels counters Jericho into a roll-up and gets the pin. But what a match. This was so great. It was my favorite thing live. It was just as great as I remembered on a rewatch. After the match, Michaels extends his hand. They embrace in a hug. The place goes crazy.
JR is saying how proud he is of Jericho. Absolutely. And basically at the exact moment. In the exact moment that JR says that, Jericho then absolutely waffles Michaels low with a kick. And the best part is that the hug that was going to take place still happens, but it's Michaels collapsing into Jericho's arms after getting low blowed. JR loses his mind at this point. That's right. Calling Chris Jericho every name in the book.
And Jericho awesome. Just pushes him away as he's crumbling to the mat. It was awesome. The people were so mad. JR was mad. The people wanted to share in what a great match that was, and they wanted everyone to celebrate, but Jericho is such a great bad guy. Yeah. I loved every second of this. 22 minutes and 33 seconds. If you have not seen this match, go out of your way to watch this match. This was fantastic.
It flew by, and I loved it. The stuff that I talked about early on with it maybe not being super, super smooth didn't bother me at all. And then the second half of this match, I thought was just out of this world good, like top tier stuff.
Sylvain Grenier is in a referee shirt, and he's going to see Vince McMahon in his locker room. Yeah,
I did not understand this. I'm like, what? As I'm watching, I'm like, is that Sylvain Grenier? Like that guy?
Yeah, apparently he had done this heel ref angle at the Survivor Series previously
in Montreal
because
because when you're in Montreal, you have to do a referee screw job. Well, yeah, that plays into one of the matches later on. But then we get Tony Chimmel announcing, as we said, the new Safeco Field attendance record. And then he introduces Limp Bizkit.
Nope.
They're going to perform again.
The WWE's favorite band in the whole world, Limp Bizkit, is back to perform the theme song for WrestleMania.
Maybe it was like a copyright issue, like, the man called Vader. Maybe they couldn't call them Limp Bizkit, so they had to call them the WWE's favorite band in the whole world, Limp Bizkit. We're informed that they have an album called Crack Addict. And apparently that's what they're performing here.
Yeah, it was the theme song for WrestleMania was Crack Addict. In the arena, this was known as Beer and Bathroom Break. And so there was so I didn't see this performance because I was re-beering and in the bathroom line.
As one does.
And so and there was absolutely no rush to get back to my seat because next is the WrestleMania catfight. After a Limp Bizkit concert, we followed up with the WrestleMania catfight. So theoretically, this is intermission. And so this is nonsense happening at intermission that people in the arena would not care about. And I was definitely one of those people that did not care.
There's a bed or a bed-like structure, I think would be a better description of it, on the stage at this point, on the entrance way.
And Jonathan Coachman is on that stage next to the bed that's on the stage and introduces the Miller Lite Catfight Girls to no reaction whatsoever.
And they get
zero
individual introductions and entrances. Because God knows we need to make sure that this gets enough time.
Yes, Katana Baker of the Catfight Girls. This was actually her second appearance on a WWE pay-per-view. She appeared at Unforgiven in 2002, where she came out as part of Eric Bischoff's HLA promise.
Oh my God, I forgot about that angle.
Yeah, hot lesbian action. So she was part of that horrible segment. This was her second appearance, equally horrible. Sometimes, Adam, it's difficult to be a wrestling fan. This is one of those times.
Oh yeah, no, this is right up there in a different way, but maybe not all that different. Right up there with the Stacy Keibler Daphne wedding gown match that we talked about from Bash at the Beach 2000, where if you're in a relationship with someone and they walk into the room when you are watching this match, when they walk out of the room, you are no longer in a relationship. This definitely fits that bill.
Oh no, and it can also just be a roommate or a friend that walks into the room that might
Accurate.
not, and you're just embarrassed at that moment to be a wrestling fan. This is
the
one
uninitiated
of those moments.
This is not what you want the uninitiated to walk in and see as you're watching a professional wrestling pay-per-view.
No. So the rules. There's rules. The rules are the only weapon you can use are pillows on the bed. Got it. So Stacy Keibler comes out, and she wants in on this catfight. Tori Wilson comes out next, and it's now a fatal four-way match. The girls get their tops ripped off immediately. The Catfight Girls are on the bed hitting each other with pillows in what is the lamest pillow fight of all time.
They are sticklers for the rules, apparently.
Coachman's doing terrible play-by-play on the stage.
On a live mic.
Yeah, it was horrible. Tori and Stacy are rolling around on the ground. They roll over Coachman. Coachman gets his pants pulled down. Stacy rolls up Tori. Oh, I'm sorry. Stacy rolls up Coachman, and Tori counts a 3 count. So the Catfight Girls hit him with pillows, and Stacy Keibler's music plays.
Apparently they all won. I don't know.
Short and horrible and embarrassing.
I also would like to think that this is a callback to that match from Bash at the Beach 2000, because much like David Flair and the referee, as you said, Jonathan Coachman ends up pantsless as well. So
there's a lot of synergy between this.
A lot of synergy. It's almost like these two companies really planned this for this podcast, that we would have to see this in almost, not quite, but almost back-to-back weeks.
And that takes us to the end of part 1 of this podcast, we will be back to recount the happenings of the second half of this show, the remaining championship matches, our main event, all to come at the part 2 of WrestleMania 19, Wrestling at Random. So tune in, part 2 coming up.